to that point, it's like because even thinking about how we're podcasting and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Like some people are like, oh my gosh, like you're staying at home, you're not doing X, Y, and Z. But imagine if every media company or news channel was talking crazy, right, and was making us look worse and criminalizing us, right? So I feel like if the police force and if America is built off multiple systems of injustices, multiple systems of white supremacy, then like everyone needs to have different roles to attack it from all sides.
Absolutely.
We got to put pressure on it from all sides, right? And so if you see someone getting judged for not, protesting or going with this movement in a certain way, make sure you sort of cut that off. And for those of you who have friends or family members or people in your life who are trying to sort of pressure you into protesting in a certain way, don't get caught up in that. Your black body is enough, and you just surviving is an act of protest.
Absolutely.
Honestly, and so like with that sort of being said, right, there are a lot of ways in which we not only like judge the people and how they protest, but we also judge who these people are, and sometimes we get into these like oppressions of movements, right?
Yeah.
And so it reminds me of what happened this week with Amy Cooper and this guy named Christian Cooper, right? So for those of you who don't know, Amy Cooper threatened to call the cops on Christian Cooper and say that he was threatening her life, right?
Yeah.
Just bold-faced lying, and thankfully she was fired soon after. But Christian Cooper was actually a black activist who was also a black gay activist and was doing a lot of things for the black LGBTQIA community.
Yes.
But what happened is that a lot of people sort of tried to sort of diminish his work and say, well, there's the black agenda and there's the gay agenda, right? And so I have a friend on Instagram, and you should go follow him. His Twitter, his Instagram handle is I Hate Gender, and he has this great Instagram post talking about how folks sort of try to push people against each other and diminish movements from an intersectional lens, right? And unfortunately, the people who were going at Christian Cooper were straight black males, and so I think tonight it's very important for us to really think about how we support each other as black people as a whole, right? Because a lot of times, us as black men, right, and black men are getting killed and massacred, but so are black women, so are black LGBTQIA folks, so are black trans women, and I don't think we talk about that enough. So y'all bear with us because we want to read what this man said. So he says, let's see, we're going to start from the beginning right here. The entire black community stands with black men through thick and thin. When they call black women ugly and praise white women. When they abuse their power in the church, fraternities, and in leadership positions at HBCUs. When they prey on children in the family. When they go to jail, when addiction ruins them. When they abandon families and don't pay child support. When they're murdered by police, we're all outraged. But when police murdered Rekia Boyd, when police murdered and Rekia Boyd was killed, no one showed up to the rally. Same with queer and trans black people. By arresting MLK's right-hand man and strategist and a gay black man playing the entire March on Washington for the I Have a Dream speech. Homophobic, sexist civil rights leaders pressured MLK to persuade Rustin to let him take the credit. Biden agreed to protect MLK's image, right? So the forgiveness, second chances, patience, and support is infinite. Yet, to so many black men, black women, and black queer/trans people are disposable, right? Right? And this is the other reason I've always struggled to accept images God as a white man. So we'll stop it there. But that's a very interesting and very intricate statement, right?
Absolutely.
How do we sort of navigate this? Why do you think this happens?
Because black men have been put on a pedestal. But it's because of patriarchy, right? It's not just black men; it's men in every race, color, and creed, right? This is how we understand intersectionality. I think that's super important. It's knowing that the black man is not the center, the man is not the center of the family, but that's how it's kind of perpetuated.
Right.
And I think that he brought up a great point, is that no matter how problematic someone's life was during the time that they were living. When they're killed, when a black man is killed, we still feel that. We still are outraged and we still want to ride, and we need to ride. Because, like, no matter what their life looked like, no one deserves to be killed at the hands of police, or be killed at the hands of anyone at that, right? But why don't we extend that same love and affection and support and paying for black women, for black trans folk? It's like, black queer folk, right? I think that that's what he's really getting at, is that, like, we can understand these people as human, but, like, not these people. Like, we were talking last night, I didn't even know Rakia Boyd was killed a week after Trayvon Martin was. I found out about Rakia Boyd in 2016, 2017.
Right.
And it's like, Trayvon Martin happened in 2012, 2013. It's like, we don't say her name enough. So that's why I felt so bad about Breonna Taylor, right? We had a whole episode with Kenny, talking, like, really just on, like, on some Brother Hitler Circle stuff, like,
right?
Because that's when we found out about Ahmaud Arbery and Sean Reed, and it's like, we didn't even know about Breonna Taylor, and that's not necessarily our fault, but it is at the same time. It's because we're not uplifting those stories. So it's like, I find out about Breonna Taylor maybe a day or two after, and I felt so bad because we had a whole episode and we didn't even mention this black woman. So it's like, we made it a point to mention it the next episode.
Right.
But it's like, it's always a second thought. It's always an afterthought. And I think that that's what we have to grapple with. And with black, queer, and trans folk too, it's like, there's so many black trans women that are killed every week, right? And it's like, we don't talk about them. Like, we don't know about Marsha P. Johnson. We don't know about these other folk. And it's like, that do so much for the movement, and they're pushed to the wayside. It's like James Baldwin is a hero, but we don't talk about him as much because he was queer.
Right.
Barrett Rustin was that nigga. He was really an organizer, bro. Like, he was really the top dog. And he was so selfless to be able to sit back and let other people enjoy the fruits of the labor, because he was committed to the black liberation, right? But black men, black heterosexual cisgender men don't have that same love and affection the other way. And I think that that's really what it's getting at. So, like, what I want to say is that, like, you're not pro-black if you are not for all black people.
Yeah. The way you there's a word called hotep. and it's been sort of described as being pro-black, but like T-Shaw said, anti-progress. Yeah, but like, it's crazy because I remember in undergrad, like, you know, Trayvon gets killed, you know, all the black people show up, right? Yeah. Everybody under the sun, right? Yeah. But then when we start talking about women's issues like sexual violence or assault or LGBTQIA issues, the circles get smaller and smaller and smaller.
The voices get less loud.
Yeah, and then on top of that, it's not only that the less people come, but the black heterosis men that do come, we say that these things don't exist. Like, women aren't going through that pain. Like, things aren't really bad for gay folks. Like, and I think that we sort of deny those things, right? Yeah. And so I think that it's so important that we sort of keep in mind that, like, yes, black men are suffering.
Absolutely.
But, like, it does us no good if the black man is liberated and black women, black LGBTQIA folks aren't, right? Like, like Tupac said it best. I think he was like, you know, and if we don't change, we'll have a race of babies who will hate the ladies that make the babies, right? So it's like, yeah. So we gotta also think about when we're raising black boys, and we're saying, hey, look out for the cops and stuff like that. Yeah. We also got to be teaching them, look out for your sisters. Look out for people who might identify as queer or trans too. Like, and we all got to ride for each other. We need to be at everyone's rallies, everyone's marches, right? Yes. And so when Christian Cooper, you know, is almost killed by police because Amy Cooper tries to call them on him, everyone should be like, all right, well, he's not only is he black, he's a black gay man, and like, you go through a different level of scrutiny that me, maybe as a black straight man, doesn't understand, but I got you.
Yeah.
I got you.
What's problematic too is like, so sexuality is like fairly invisible, right? So it's like, when we first see this video, like, people are riding because it's like, oh, it's a black man. Like, because what she said is like, oh, I'm going to call the police and let them know that an African-American man is threatening my life. So already what we hear is a threat. We hear that she's vocalizing that she understands how the police has functioned historically as an eradication of black men and black people.
Right.
And that she will be threatening this black man with that if he doesn't get in his place. So that's problematic. And we all hear that signal. We all hear that call. But then how do we all turn not all, but how do some of us turn tone deaf when we find out that he's a black gay man? Like, it's crazy how that switches, and I think that that's what we have to address if we're ever to reach liberation. Right. We can't be a functioning community that is on top and that has been liberated, and we can't reconcile these differences within. Because I think that, like, the differences is what splits us, and it's like we have to be together because we don't have enough power outside of that. And I think that that's super important. So what I also want to say is that, like, those tweets, because I've been seeing tweets as like, oh, black man, be safe. Like, the world's hard on you, black man. Like, tell black men you love them. And it's like, yeah, I appreciate that. Like, I really do love.
For sure.
I really appreciate that love because it's like, it's genuine, right? But, like, I quote tweeted every tweet I've seen because it's like, no, let's open that up to black families.
Right.
Black people. Just say black people, because it's like, black women are being murdered in their own homes. Right. Like, black queer people are being murdered walking down the street. So it's like,
and to your point, T, like, the reason why it's so important to not just say, hey, black men, you're suffering, hey, black men, you're okay, is because once we start to do that, right, what you hear as a black man, what you're socialized to hear in that is that, all right, my issues come first, my issues are the most important. So now, when you have problematic black men in the community who are doing some of the things that I Hate Gender sort of, reference, right? Yeah. So, like, maybe, you're doing sexual violence, or maybe you are doing something that's actually harmful to other black people. It becomes, oh, well, that's a black man, he's suffering, and X, Y, and Z. That actually happened during the civil rights movement. There were black women telling other black women, oh, I know this civil rights leader tried to, like, assault you, but, like, you should have given him some because you know what he means to the movement. And so I think that, yes, to your point, black men we are suffering, we are hurting, but it's all of us. Yeah. It's all of us. And I think that, just because you might see more black men getting killed on the media, there are a lot of ways in which black women, black queer people, and black trans folks are suffering that's silent, that's not getting publicized, it's not getting the hashtags, right? Absolutely. And so we got to think about that. This is about all of us.
Yeah, we need to be riding just as hard.
Exactly. So it's just something extremely important to think about, right? And tonight, exactly, right? It's on all of us, right? Yeah. So what are some things that black hetero cis men can do to sort of open up their minds, right, and support? Like what does that take, right?
That's such an important question, right? I think that, like, because that is the question to liberation. It's like, when we can figure out how to support people and love people as much as they love us, I think we'll be in a great position. Yeah. And I think it's being empathetic, right? It's like, because they can empathize with us, like, they're not black men, but they can understand, like, what it would be to be in a black man's shoes. And it's like, why can't we do the same thing? And I think that we've talked about this a little bit, but it's like, being exposed to those situations and those I don't want to say lifestyles because that's not the right word, but just being exposed to it. I think one of the best points you've ever made, I think we've talked about it on the podcast, but just also in person, is when black men are on college campuses are exposed to, like, sexual assault survivors, right? Yeah. And they tell their stories. Before, I mean, this goes into your research, so you can talk about it even better than I can, but it's like, when black men in general, like, we don't see it, we don't hear it, so it's like it's not happening. But it's like, then somebody tells us their story, and it's like, oh, this is really happening. It's like, oh, like, we have, because then you feel like you have to do something, right? And I think that's super important.
Yeah, and I think that, I think that black men, we grow up, we get criminalized, we know the things that are against us, and I think that it makes us prioritize, like, our struggles and our trials and tribulations over other folks. But to T. Shaw's point, it's all about hearing people's stories and looking at someone in the face and saying, oh my gosh, like, you're a human being too.
Yeah, I see you as a person.
Yeah, I see you, and, like, you're like, and, like, I accept you. I don't just tolerate you, I accept you and I believe you, right?
I love you.
Yeah, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like, you're worthy of that. And I think sometimes it does take, like you're saying, sitting beside someone and saying, like, oh my gosh, like, this is what happened to you, and, like, you followed all the rules, but, like, people didn't treat you like a human being, and it's like, oh my gosh, people don't treat me like a human being either, right? And so it's funny because you actually connect based off your perception as inhumane, right? People don't look at black men, black women, black queer folks, black trans folks as human, and so that's our connecting point, right?
Yeah.
So you should seek out those stories where you're just like, hey, like tell me your story if you're willing. Tell me about some of the struggles and trials and tribulations, as I do my own research as well.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right. And so I think that's a big part of it too, you know.
Yeah.